switched on. We gotta move now.
Scripted shooters. Luckily, that's already a good, clearly defined term for this style of game, so there's little confusion in dropping the marketing and reviewer buzzspeak which so often tags it as cinematic. Given that cinematography is dependent on framing and angles, it seems absurd that anyone would describe a game with a fixed first-person view as cinematic, regardless of how frequently it might grab control from the player. But there are a couple of reasons, cutscenes notwithstanding, that many people have come to view games ranging from Half-Life to Modern Warfare as cinematic. Scripting itself is a main element of these titles which leaves a cinematic impression. Scripted events are used in games to bring life and depth to otherwise featureless environments. While the progression of the game may be unchanged by scripted scenery, the impression of the game is vastly improved. When Half-Life came out in 1998, it wowed PC gamers with its consistent, bustling world, which was full of conflict and destruction. As they progressed through the corridors of Black Mesa, they got to pick sides in a war between races and watch as human achievements collapse indifferently. Zombies ate scientists, giants smashed through doors, and helicopters did helicopter things. It may not be as flashy as modern titles, but play it today and it's still impressive, and it feels cinematic. What is it, though, that allows movies to lay claim to the techniques of scripting and choreography? After all, both of these terms find their origin on the stage, not the screen. On top of that, in many ways, getting a scripted scene into a video game is much simpler than making it work in a movie or play. Movies and plays require rehearsal, memorization, and multiple takes to capture a scene in its true form, while a sequence in a video game plays out in the same order down to minute details every single time. Even removing the element of player control, scripting is simpler for games. Take this scene in the beginning of Human Revolution. While it is in first person, it's the equivalent of what's known in movies as a tracking shot. Tracking shots can often be the biggest test of a director's skill in movie making, because there's no crutch in the form of editing, and the cameraman must navigate complex scenes along with the actors. Everyone, including the extras, has to be perfectly coordinated. Tracking shots like the ones in Children of Men, Goodfellas, and even Kill Bill become major talking points. But while the intro of Human Revolution is a nice tour through a research facility, there's no illusion that it took nearly as much effort to ensure that it happened identically on each playthrough. As a matter of fact, the intro would be far more impressive if it occurred at random and was different each time. Uniformity is good for movies because as a linear medium, they can't and aren't supposed to be different each time you play them. If you capture a real, random occurrence on video, the video of that occurrence won't change. In this way, scripted fake events and real events are one and the same for video. But games are different because gameplay is that random occurrence. And so while an environment of scripted events is more realistic in games than a static environment, it's only the first step towards realism. The second step is emergence, randomization, and procedural generation.
Close. Yeah, I think I wasn't running Epsilon. Oh, you bastard! That fucking hurts!
But that still doesn't seem like an explanation for why scripted shooters feel cinematic to us, but it has to do with that entanglement of fakeness and realism that occurs in movies. Cinema forms our first point of reference for things we wouldn't normally see in day-to-day life. Crashing elevators, zombie attacks, and strafing helicopters in Half-Life all seemed cinematic because the first place we saw them was in a movie. By this token, even real-life experiences can feel cinematic if we see them on video beforehand. For instance, driving into an exotic city can present a number of sights and sounds which had only previously existed in the realm of film. It can feel cinematic to see a monkey steal fruit from a child in a bustling bazaar, not because movies invented this occurrence, but because they portrayed it, and our subconscious doesn't see the difference. We now go to museums not simply to see art and sculpture, capture, we've already seen it, but to understand how it exists. So while in the future, this genre of FPS would still be best labeled as that of the scripted shooter, the scripted shooter would be best described as cinematic feeling or realistic rather than cinematic. However, there is one area where some of these shooters are cinematic, and that's their lighting. Valve games in particular use lighting in an extremely nuanced and psychologically manipulative way, to the extent that they are able to direct their games in a sense by leading the player's attention through a scene.
We designed this room to draw the player's eyes to the box. The light from the observation room casts horizontal shadows that point at the box, which is directly lit by a warm light from the ceiling. This warm light helps the box stand out against the predominantly cool test chamber lighting. The varying size squares of the off-limit surface also help direct the player's attention upward.
In the developer commentaries for most Valve games, decisions similar to this one are described on multiple occasions. This sort of lighting direction melds communication of gameplay objectives with aesthetics in a way that other developers would do well to take note of. Even the Call of Duty games, which have frequently impressive lighting effects, don't really use lighting for anything outside of eye candy. Generally, games go out of their way to emulate movies, and in the process miss the point. Rarely do games recognize their much stronger ancestor, stage play. The idea that, for instance, player agency ruins narratives seems ridiculous when we consider that stage play has always had the same issue. Rehearsals are done for a reason. The first cold read of a play is going to be disastrous compared to a refined run-through. And look at the amount of language that is shared. Even player and actor were once synonyms. Dialogue trees and tactics all begin to look more like inflection when viewed through this lens. But no play is cinematic because the camera does not exist in plays. Games encompass both media. You may have noticed a number of flaws and gaps in these videos. Video responses to my videos are automatically approved, but if you don't fancy yourself a video maker, please leave a comment, send me a message, or send me a link to a blog post as a response. As much of my argument here is in the realm of loose semantics, it's totally open to challenge and expansion. My main intent is to draw attention to an undervalued element of game design.